Good morning. My name is Todd Gray, and I serve as the Director of Institutional Advancement at DC Fiscal Policy Institute. It is my pleasure to welcome you today to Momentum for Change, Momentum for Change, The Road Ahead, an ecosystem conversation on preventing the displacement of Black, Brown, and low-income DC residents. Today, we will be in community, for community, led by community, hearing from many of the important grassroots organizations and advocates on the ground working to stem displacement. We'll hear from DCFPI's Executive Director Erica Williams and Ileana Golding, Senior Policy Analyst with DCFPI, whose body of work focuses on community wealth building and advancing affordable housing initiatives to protect tenants and those facing housing insecurity. We will also hear from Mariah Barber, who is our spoken word artist for today, also more commonly known as Beyond Your Definition. For over 15 years, Mariah has been creating social justice-oriented art, performing at client justice rallies, the 2020 George Floyd Uprising, and DC Pride's poetry event. Mariah's motto is, some people do, some people never do. Some people overdo. How do you do? So I welcome to the podium no other than Mariah Beyond Your Definition Barber. Let's receive her.
If I could have everybody clap with me a little bit. We're gonna slow it down. They say they want the Lauryn Hill vibe, so I put on the miseducation. Yeah. They say they want that Lauryn Hill vibe, so I put on the miseducation. I was teaching Black and Brown students this semester. I mean, they were teaching me, because they packed so much more information than I was planning in my lessons about poetry. We talked about onomatopoeias, similes, metaphors, and themes. Mostly, they told me about the conditions of this city, this capital of a country where we're learning capitalism, criminalization, inflation, and all simultaneously. Meanwhile, these kids and their families' homework is just trying to learn to survive. I got to look at life through their tiny eyes of these tiny humans, and what I saw was unfiltered truth. The youth are observers of time that are more honest than clock hands could ever be, catching any and everything that doesn't sit right with them from their tiny desk. 1, my students propose that the current policy needs erasing and rewriting from their classrooms pencils. Number 2. My kids said our skin should be our favorite color, instead of just focusing on everything drenched in red, white, and blue. They said self-love is patriotism too. I could count on them to tell it like it was with their art. They share the things that adults are too ashamed to say out loud. That war is terrifying, and that freedom ain't always free. That deportations make no sense when we're all descendentes de inmigrantes in this country. I got an earful on how bullying happens from the abuse at home and how COVID-19 took so many important people and they're now forever gone. And how weekly folks are still getting sick. So they're confused about why the pandemic has supposedly ended. How mental health conditions are still on the rise. And kids can use depression in a sentence before they even understand that that word starts with D. I didn't witness any spelling bees. Guess they were too busy trying to save the bees and understand how climate change remedies could be solved before it brings us to our knees. These kids are short, y'all. So they asked me to write the big things they had to say on the board where they couldn't reach. Black letters on white boards about the changes they wanted to see. I guess even in classrooms, we see these world's inequities. paying certain people to sit at tables and make rules in places that some can never access or be. We be raising issues like raising hands in my classroom. I would say a metaphor about voting in the House of Representatives, but in DC, we have taxation without representation. Because we're not a state, but there's all these statements about who we be representing. Once we talked about how they could create anything they wanted on their blank page or in their mind. And that's why God built their bones like white columns on a temple. That's why God put all that knowledge between their temples so they could build, dream, and design. We talked about how they were, in fact, the masters of their own fate. One student named Destiny hesitated, said, nah, not in this city. I realized that even with her namesake, what I was asking was as foreign as the places their parents come from. Because in this city, test scores determine how many prison beds to prep. And that was just my 3rd grade class. See, depending on zip codes, opportunities don't come knocking, but pick and choose, following the same patterns of disparities we see in the news. They say, in this city, the bedroom panes aren't thick enough to keep out the lullabies of sirens. And that even in my students' dreams, the only time they see anyone getting saved is in the prison pew. I asked them to clap their hands and snap their fingers so they can feel the reverberation of their own power in their palms. Because I believe they can make a change. See, I have to teach my students to be strong and to amplify their own words in systems that are operating just as they were built to. These systems' sole purpose is to silence them. So I teach them to snap and clap and speak to dismantle this oppression that we see. And they start to drown out the sounds of the whole block. And the day before they got to my classroom, and even the path they have to walk on home. I tell my students they're just as melodic as the melanated music they turn on when they listen to Spotify. But they say, nah, they ain't got enough people listening. And besides, their voice and their followers be way too low. They ask, why isn't equity their birthright? Ask me how to spell gentrification. Ask me if they could have colored pencils so they could redline the pages the way the wards are separated. I go to different schools all over this district and learn quickly the difference between an education campus and a neglected building they happen to teach elementary school in. It's the distinction between ongoing construction on a building, exposing our kids to contaminants, and funneling them into prison pipelines versus having an abundance of construction paper, maintaining healthy teacher-to-student ratios, and ensuring timely graduation. But there's just a few blocks difference. I taught Black and brown students this semester. I mean, they were teaching me. I was still making sense of all that I was learning. I still have so many questions, like why is there more lead in the water than in the pencils? And why is there so much food scarcity? I turned some students into poets just because they were waiting on snack time during my after-school program. I asked kids about their heroes. They tell me their mama, even though she's never home because she's working to try to afford to have one. They tell me their teachers, even though they're underpaid and still here. The kids tell me they wish Miles Morales could swing webs and create a safety net that they need for their way to and from home. They want to know less about gun violence and more about friendly neighborhoods. They say they've been reading stories and think maybe Robin Hood had a reason because these kids are so smart, y'all. And they can tell these resources for the hood have never been evenly distributed. And until I see change, I'm gonna keep learning from them. I was teaching Black and brown kids this semester. I mean, they were teaching me. They say they want Lauryn Hill vibes, so I put on the miseducation. Thank you.
How about one more round of applause for Mariah and her students who obviously know what's up here in the district. Good morning, good people. Good morning. Thank you for being here. I'm Erica Williams. I'm Executive Director of the DC Fiscal Policy Institute, and very excited to welcome you all here for today's Momentum for Change event. Today makes a continuation of our 2023 fundraising campaign to power DCFPI's multi-year strategic plan for ensuring racially just policy decisions driven in deep collaboration with communities here in the district. And as we shape the road ahead for district level policymaking that centers Black and brown people, we have to be sure that every step forward leaves nobody behind. This means prioritizing racially equitable investments that are designed to repair longstanding harm and create the conditions that allow for broadly shared prosperity into the future. And I think importantly, as we reimagine and remake what DC is, where we're going, that it's imperative we ensure the residents, the folks who live here now, get to stay here and live in their communities. We need to make sure that folks aren't priced out of their homes, their history, their culture, and that racial and economic inequity aren't the things determining who belongs in the district. Washington, D.C. today has one of the highest rates of displacement in the country, and the role of anti-Blackness in particular in this reality is just undeniable, right? What was once the first majority Black major city in America is now where longtime Black residents and a lot of other folks too are being pushed out of the very places that they made their home over generations. These are Black and brown folks who shaped and stewarded DC's vibrant culture and economy. And folks are being pushed out. You know, we know that in 2000, over half of DC's residential neighborhoods, more than 30, were majority Black. In 2020, only 22 residential areas remain majority Black. So things have changed. We know that over that same time period, the Black population in the district has declined by 58,000 people, while the white population grew by almost 86,000. You know, and sadly, this is not just DC. This is part of a broader national trend. In fact, 9 out of 10 US cities with the highest populations of Black people have experienced declines in that population in the last 2 decades. So what we really want to work for with all of you is making sure that DC is the model for how to end that trend, how to end that harm. We know that displacement is not a natural, unavoidable market process, and we actually remember the ways that it's been used as a tool for racial oppression throughout our history, right? Whether that's racially restrictive housing covenants, an eminent domain that made sure that we had all white communities that were well-resourced and Black and brown communities that were not. We remember the falsely touted urban renewal programs of the 50s, 60s, and 70s that cut through and cut out entire communities in major cities across the country. And we see the way that today's structural problems around affordable housing or unaffordable housing and general wealth extraction both reflect and result in profit-motivated policymaking that discards the soul of the city, its people, right? So as DCFPI continues to drive our proactive liberatory policy research agenda, in partnership with lots of folks in this room, community groups, local organizers, tenant organizers, affordable housing experts, and so many more, we are all together charting a course toward an anti-displacement agenda. That's what we want to do with you. Despite major recent investments in housing production and significant investments in home ownership, we know that DC lawmakers have underfunded or failed to fund more immediate term strategies to support residents who are here right now and need things right now and are struggling to get by on low incomes. Quickly stabilizing housing for those urgently at risk of displacement and investing in preservation to expanding Black homeownership and other wealth building opportunities more broadly. Those are things that we put forward today in a new agenda for ending displacement in the district written by Eliana Golding. in partnership and shaped by many of the folks that you're going to hear from today. That report, that agenda lays out all the things we need to do in the immediate and medium term to help stem displacement. Folks, Black, Latinx, low income residents of all identities in the district, they need rent control and eviction prevention, and they need it right now. They need robust income support and work support programs, and they need those right now. They need landlord accountability and the right to organize today. And they need equity and access to quality schools, to grocery stores, to public transportation that works, and all kinds of other essential amenities that many in the district do enjoy, but others don't. So promoting an anti-displacement agenda is our collective responsibility. And we need to further the work to support DC's leaders in making these kinds of choices. The tools for preventing displacement, both the old ones and the new ones, are well within our reach. These are things we can do, and it's just a matter of whether we choose to do them. So let's not forget that across the district, people are leading hard conversations about the central role that racism plays in shaping this whole landscape that we're working in, right? That people are showing up to direct actions, they're showing up to community events, they're making their voices heard amidst local injustices, global wars, and ongoing pandemic. They're talking to their teachers about it. They're demanding leadership from our leaders in the name of justice, peace, and prosperity, shared prosperity. So that is hope in action. It's a sense of possibility driven by people here in DC, and that another world is possible. So together we are that momentum for change. I want everyone to remember that as we get into our conversation today. And I'm going to invite up here Eliana herself so we can have a little conversation about her work. So Eliana, talk to us a little bit about your vision for ending displacement and the holistic view on that.
Great question. The vision for this piece actually came out of a lot of conversations with people in this room. I began my career in housing actually as a tenant organizer and had the opportunity to literally sit on people's couches and hear from them about what were the things that were impacting their lived experience, what were the things that were threatening the safety of their housing stability. And I've carried those stories with me through my time at DCFPI and have continued to listen and show up in coalition spaces and try to glean from all of the experts, folks who are experts in their own experience of eviction and displacement, folks who are experts in some of those policy solutions like preservation, and trying to understand and collect along the way how do we put this together into a holistic vision? Because what we're seeing right now is that the system that exists, that has been created, has just profoundly failed people. And we see that in the statistics that you shared earlier. We see that in the narratives and the anecdotes that we've heard from our partners and friends. And so, yeah, I just wanted to say that this holistic approach was really the result of many of you and the people that you know, so I'm grateful for that. I wanted to just name the 6 principles because I don't know that I'm gonna say them at any other time. So I'm just gonna name what they are and then categorize them. So the first is that we wanna stabilize housing for those at risk of immediate displacement. That means eviction prevention and rent supports. We want to invest in housing preservation, not just production. So we need to dedicate funding for preservation and not just build new buildings, but also be preserving them, which I think is also poetically poignant when we're thinking about how we're preserving communities. We also need to preserve the buildings that people live in. We absolutely need to be holding landlords accountable to tenants. There's an inherent power dynamic there, and it is sometimes very difficult to counteract the narrative that tenants, that we see often that tenants are the ones who are failing by not paying rent, et cetera, when in fact there is a very powerful power dynamic, and we have to remind ourselves of that as we're approaching, taking a holistic approach to housing policy. Also, we need to protect the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, this sort of sacred right that DC residents have to organize and purchase their buildings when they go up for sale. And in order to do that, we need to protect the programs that allow that right to exist. As I've learned a lot from you and my colleagues, we need to also invest in income supports and work programs, and basic income to make sure that people have the resources not just to stay in their homes but also to thrive and invest in their futures. And then, speaking of which, we need to invest in wealth building opportunities for individuals and in community, whether that's through home ownership or other ways that we are exploring at DCFPI. That's a lot, and so I want to break that down into basically 3 buckets. The way I think about this is we need resources for the housing stock, got to take care of the housing stock. We need resources for the people, because got to take care of the people, and we need to keep the system accountable. So that's my vision.
I love that. I love that. So, I mean, you mentioned the power dynamic and some of the trends. What does a reparative approach look like to you? What does it mean to you?
I want to bring this, when I think about this question, it's really helpful for me to take a second and ground myself in the reality that this is about people, and it's about our communities and our histories. And as we go into, in somewhat depth in the paper, the history of housing policy is rife with racism, classism, and an abuse of power, and a prioritization of profit over people and communities. And so I think as we're considering a holistic and comprehensive approach to housing policy, we have to very boldly and courageously confront the wrongs in our history and in our present, because it's not just in our history, it is also in our present. And I really loved the way that you said, Mariah, to erase, the policy needs erasing and rewriting. Mm-hmm. I feel that way often when I'm looking at these long codes and the policies that we've created that have really entrenched racism into everything, every element of our housing policy, from tenants, the way we enforce eviction, to who has access to home ownership. And so for me, taking a reparative approach is essential. If we want thriving, safe, happy communities, we need to be able to look straight on at the things that are wrong, and make repair for those.
Yeah. I always think about the fact that it has taken really intentional policy and practice to get us to the outcomes we see right now. And the good news about that, if you can find good news about that, is that means with intentional policy and practice, we can actually do different. We can chart a different course. So I appreciate that. What were some surprising or particularly powerful sort of learnings or gleanings from the research you did and the work you did to create these recommendations?
I learned a lot. Learning about housing history and housing policy has been a passion of mine for more than 10 years, but having the opportunity to put this together into a holistic vision allowed me to confront some of these really painful truths of our past and present. And I've had the opportunity to spend some time reading Chocolate City, which if you haven't read and you're passionate about DC, I recommend reading. Mm-hmm. And it reminded me that this story of displacement doesn't just start with modern era gentrification. It starts with the dispossession of Native peoples on this land, and carries through to today. And so that's something that I want to continue to carry with me, and remember that there is a legacy here, and that it requires listening and repair for generations, really. And so that's one thing that I wanted to call out. It's sort of a different, actually no, I'll stay in that lane for a moment. Dr. Mindy Fullilove wrote this really powerful book called Root Shock, which is all about the ways that displacement and dispossession cause literal harm. She's a doctor, a medical doctor, cause literal physical harm to our bodies. And to communities. And I found learning about that really powerful as someone who feels my feelings deeply in my body, and to understand that those who are evicted or forced out of their homes because they can't afford rent, or because the amenities around them no longer serve their needs, or because of violence, that is felt in one's core, and not just in one's wallet. And so that's something that I found really powerful in this learning. On the somewhat nerdier side, and I will call out a few people in the room, I learned a lot about housing preservation financing, which is fascinating and challenging, and something that I'm hoping to dive more into with the help of some folks in this room also, in the ways that we, it's not so simple to just be okay, we have an old building, we'll fix it up, we'll keep the rent stable. there's a lot that goes into that. And so looking forward to a partnership of many folks in this room and figuring out that problem. And then finally on or 2 more points. One is that data is really important. And as we're doing research, as a research organization, that's something that I'm sure members of our team all of us have bumped up against as we're trying to tell these stories. One thing in particular that is feeling poignant for me right now is as we are analyzing census data, realizing the margin of error and the severe undercount, for example, of immigrant communities across the country, including in DC, really does a disservice to the research and the policy recommendations that we can make about policies that impact immigrant communities in DC. So that's something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about, and I'm hopeful that we can do some advocacy around. Yeah, and things are hard to measure, and it's hard to make change without being able to understand the full picture. And then lastly, probably the most powerful thing that I continued to learn through this process is just the incredible tenacity of communities. Learning the stories of each person who's about to speak once I stop talking has been just profoundly moving to me. Many of you are sitting in the front here, and I just want to express my enormous gratitude to you for all the teaching that you have done for me, and I hope you know that everything that you've said to me appears in some way in this report. And if you are where, Eliana? I want to see more. Please know that this is not the end. This is our opening move, and I hope that people see it this way, is that this is our vision statement, and the work comes after this. So that's some gratitude to you.
Okay. Final question, and then I'm going to get up off the stage. So, what other research and advocacy is kind of emerging for you in your work at DCFPI out of this piece? Because this is an agenda, but it has there's a lot of threads there, a lot of different directions. So, where are you going to focus?
There are a lot of threads, and my hope that is as we expand our work at DCFPI that we can continue to find the channels and avenues that we can go down together as a team and as an ecosystem in a community. DCFPI is certainly not the only organization working on this, and so as we're picking something up, I know that there's other folks in this room who will pick up other threads. But for our part, some things that I'm really interested and excited to be working on is diving deeper into tenants' rights, particularly around tenant organizing and the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act. We've seen, unfortunately, some renewed attacks on that right from the executive and from the council, and our hope is to be participating in some real education for policymakers about how important it is to preserving affordable housing, to preserving communities, and we're hoping to dive into some more research on that. I mentioned this earlier, but I would also really love to spend some more time doing some learning, listening, and work around the experience of different immigrant communities in DC. Like I said, the data is often not there, and I think that does a disservice to the visibility of the issues. And so I would love for us to be spending some more time there. And then finally, an area of growth for me that is really exciting and interesting is around community wealth building. Homeownership gets a lot of attention because in America it has been the primary way that people find stability and wealth. And perhaps we can think about ways that we can dismantle the sort of fundamental racism that has built the way that homeownership system works, and find some ways that we can still have folks who have been denied access to homeownership, allow them to access that stability and that security without remaking or reifying some of the actually nefarious elements of that. So community wealth building, community organizing, and the people. Back to that.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your work and for bringing this vision. And I'm really excited to hear what everybody else has to say. So I'm going to let you take over.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, all. Would you hand me that notebook that says 5 minutes? Thank you. So we're about to hear from 6 speakers who are going to share 6 very different stories about their experiences in the district and in the DMV area, and how their life experiences intersect with the idea of displacement in housing. I've said this before, I'm very grateful that you all have been willing to join us here. I'm hoping that everyone else here can hear the power of your stories, of your truth, and that hopefully while you're speaking, people are able to think about ways that they can support you and the work that you're doing. And so I'm just going to say, like, truly less than a sentence about each person and allow you each to introduce yourselves so you can speak your truth. But first, I'm going to invite up Kay Neely, who is a powerful member of the Woodner Tenants Union. Thank you. You can come up here if they want here.
Good day, everyone. My name is Kay, and I'm from DC, raised in Petworth, and I proudly serve on the Woodner Tennis Union and the Ward 1 Mutual Aid. I've been living in the Woodner for about 8 years. Today, I want to shed light on a critical issue close to our hearts: eviction defense. In the United States, housing is not universally recognized as a human right. Daily, countless individuals, including those in Ward 1, and specifically the Woodner Apartments, confront the harrowing reality of eviction. It's an experience that creates feelings of isolation and fear, triggering heightened levels of anxiety and depression. We face these challenges head on at the Woodner Tennis Union through our eviction defense group. I want to share with you a portion of our mission statement. The Woodner Tenants Union Eviction Defense Group supports people to defend themselves against eviction filings, to help defend others, and to grow as leaders who have been through the struggle. We aim to create a future without evictions and to build tenant power. Here's our approach to accomplishing that. We actively monitor cases against our neighbors, reaching out to them with the awareness that some of them may not even know about their eviction proceedings. In these moments, we assure them that they are not alone. We connect our neighbors with free legal services because everyone has the right to sound legal counsel, not only those with financial means. Realizing that education is paramount in this fight, we ensure everyone receives and thoroughly comprehends the DC Tenant Bill of Rights. We conduct sessions on understanding your tenant's rights through collaborations with other housing justice organizations. One of the most important things we do is share insights gained from our own eviction battles, enlightening our neighbors about their rights as tenants. This is part of how we build power. During our discussions, we found that many are unaware that their home should be 100% habitable and free of health hazards or poor conditions. From pest problems to malfunctioning appliances, plumbing issues to hazardous materials, tenants deserve safe and habitable living spaces. We discovered that many of our neighbors are dealing with a lot of these concerns. This suggests that the landlord might be violating their tenant rights. In certain instances, the landlord may be obligated to compensate them for not addressing those issues in a timely manner. We guide our neighbors to asserting these rights and helping to ensure landlords are held accountable for neglecting maintenance issues. Acknowledging the disparity in digital access, we extend our resources with those without access to computers or cell phones, ensuring that they can participate in court proceedings online or by telephone. When our neighbors attend court proceedings, we stand by their side, providing support to instill strength and a sense of solidarity. When it's virtual, we show up and we show our presence online, extending our support to them in a digital display of unity. In closing, let me reiterate the core tenet of our mission. We stand together as tenants to protect our human right to housing. We believe the eviction We believe the eviction legal process is designed to benefit landlords by overwhelming, intimidating, shaming, or isolating tenants, making it harder for them to fight back. But we know that our strength comes from working together in a fight against eviction. Their strength is money, our strength is solidarity. We have an Eviction Fighters Fund where we fundraise to strategically use resources to support organizing and to help each other in our homes. For those that wish to support our cause, please visit our Patreon. It's patreon.com, Whitner Tenants. You can also find us online on Twitter and Instagram at Whitner Union. Thank you for your attention, and let's stand united against eviction injustice.
Thank you, Kay. I'm going to invite up now LaToya Walker, who is a pillar of community in so many ways, gives real life and meaning to what mutual aid is. I'm really honored to have you. You are involved in so many groups and organizations and connected, so I didn't want to try to list them all, but feel free to just mention everything that you want to. So thank you, LaToya.
Hello, everyone. I'm LaToya Walker. I'm sorry. I'm LaToya Walker, and I have 10 children. I have 5 grandchildren, and I also have a group of young men, Black young men, who I work with, that I am trying to get off the streets. I do this on my own. Also, let me not leave out, all of my kids have graduated high school, and so I just have 2 more left, and I'm done. So, but that's just of my own. So, but I still have others that's on the street who I am still trying to get to graduate. But not just that. I started working in elementary schools. I was volunteering. So after that, I started realizing that I have a lot of kids out here who is not really with their moms, home with their families. So, of course, I'm mom, so I started taking them in. I'm sorry. I started taking them in as they were mine. So I started realizing that they was hungry. So I would start feeding them. So as I was doing this, the school was realizing this, so then they hired me. So I started working as a teacher aide. So as doing that, as time was going, I didn't realize a doctor who saw me into the school, she decided that she wanted to start a nonprofit with me. So we did that, and then as time was going, I did get sick. I have epilepsy. So as time was going, it's crazy because as I'm working with the young men that are in the streets, a lot of them they don't like going to other people because of the racism. They're scared to ask for help because of the attention that they get from other ones. You know, they go ask for help and then their backs are turned. So I'm there, to speak for them. So I'm sorry, I'm lost. So I helped them do that. I'm so lost. I'm sorry. So like I said, I helped them with the feeding. But yes, and I get the group of young men. I do a lot. So we do that. I try to take them out to do activities. Also, with the doctor, she found me, and we did we did it in the streets. But what I found that was weird, I saw that she got scared of my boys. I saw that, like, she was, like, really getting scared of them. So I saw that I had to pull away, like, because if she's scared of them, then how are you going to help me? Like, I'm showing them, okay, we showed them how to do yoga. Like, yoga was good because it helped me. I never heard of yoga. And when I did yoga, I cried. So it was something different, but they liked that. So just the fact that I'm like, okay, they like that, let's keep that going. We was putting them in school, all of that. But then I found that when they got upset or something, it scared her. But we're supposed to counsel them. Let's counsel them. Let's help them. Let's bring in the support that we said that we would do for them. So I saw that wasn't helping. We had a building. I'm trying to continue to build my mission. I have a mission. It's no longer a job. It's my mission to continue to try to give them. If I could get a big house, I would. I've adopted one of the kids that I have. He's in college. So it's like I want all my kids to go to college, like to build themselves. I'm still taking in children. We feed our homeless. We feed our seniors. Our seniors in our community, they was even kind of weird, but you wouldn't believe, like, they go and help our seniors on 14th Street. Like, they're not scared of them. So I love that. And I would like to continue to do that within time, so, yeah. Oh, my God.
Do you have anything more you want to say? You go.
It's a lot. Like, I could sit here and continue to talk because I do a lot. Like, my young men, they're just trying to continue to show that they're trying to be somebody. They just don't want people to continue to be scared of them because they're Black. Yeah.
So give me a hug. Thank you, Latoya. I also wanted to mention, I meant to say this at the start, after all of our speakers, we're gonna have some time to just socialize and mill around. And my hope is that folks who are interested in supporting the work that people are mentioning here can approach them in a one-on-one, more personal way and ask, like, how can I support you? So if these stories move you, I encourage you to just introduce yourselves. Thank you, Latoya. So I'm gonna introduce now two people. Who actually met separately, but are both very involved and connected to the Baldwin House Collective. The first person is Abby Shakur. They're a tenant steward and organizer involved in the Baldwin House Collective. I'm also going to introduce Sulema Ulloa Santos, who I first met when she was sharing her story about the TOPA process at her building in Columbia Heights, and is now involved in the Baldwin House Collective. And so I'm going to invite you both up to share it. Feel free to go on the stage or stand right here. Either way. But thank you for joining us.
Hi, y'all. How's it going? I don't know if I'll sit, but you want me to go first?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Lovely. Great. Really happy to be here. Thank you so much. It's, I think, really heartening to me to see so many people in one room who are interested in, stopping displacement and talking about these issues that we're facing. A bit about me. I grew up in DC and Baltimore. I'm Black and white. Grew up in a Black queer household. Originally in DC before my family was forced to move because of the rising cost of living. I had most of my formative years in Baltimore, and even though my family was kind of solidly middle class, I would say we had our struggles, but fairly solidly middle class. My community was very poor, and so I identify with I count myself as poor. I mean, my best friends didn't have lights, like walking down the street, like you got to look tough, otherwise someone might see you as an opportunity, like you got to. Look behind your back. Like that's just kind of the environment that I grew up in, that the folks I count as family grew up in, and I was fortunate enough to be good at school, I guess. And I thank my mother more than anything else for that. And I mean, we fought a lot over it, but it wound up, for the best in the long run, because I think because of that privilege, I'm where I am now, where I'm an organizer and I'm able to, think about ways to give back to that community that I had to leave behind. And I mourn a lot for the people that I had to leave behind to wind up here. But I'm grateful for the experience because it's brought me here and it brought me to Baldwin House. I started organizing mostly mutual aid programs, like free grocery distribution programs in 2020. And that led me to the Baldwin House Project slowly over time, where I was very proud to co-lead our fundraising campaign. We were able to, well, first off, a little bit of background. About 2 years ago, a mid-sized apartment building in the Shaw Columbia Heights neighborhood went up for sale. One of our organizers, Natasha Napper, was living in the building at the time, who's very involved in the Ward 1 Mutual Aid group. And luckily, I think a lot of the folks in that Ward 1 Mutual Aid Corps were able to mobilize to try and purchase the building. And it started a 2-year-long fight with the landlord to actually purchase it. And I came in about a year into the effort, about like last August of last year. And by the new year, I was taking an active role in a lot of the communications work and organizing work, and I have very little experience, no experience at all in kind of organizing at this level. But by March of this year, I was co-leading the fundraising campaign, the fundraising part of things, and we were able to raise over $1.5 million through community loans. Yes, incredible. By tapping networks of mostly wealthy white folks who want to contribute to projects like this, and it was huge for me. Coming where I come from, just seeing what's actually possible by asking for it. I think so. Now we're focused on building the building into affordable housing, but also making it a mutual aid hub, like a center for a semi-public community center, like a community resource where folks can come and know that they can find resources, they can find connectivity. And so I don't know. I cannot overstate how powerful that mission is to me. I think back to where I come from and the folks that I left behind and how critical a resource like that would have been for those folks. And when I reconnect with folks, I'm like, yo, I just bought a building. They're like, what? How? And I think of the disempowerment that I felt growing up, that they felt growing up, of just we know that things are wrong, we know that we're struggling, that we're suffering, but we don't know what we can do to stop it. And Baldwin House has been huge as a testament to just what can be accomplished with community organizing. And I wish I could just give that sense of empowerment to the folks that are growing up in conditions that I grew up in, that folks around me grew up in, to tell them hey, through organizing, through not seeing each other as competitors, but as companions, as collaborators, we can accomplish so much, and you don't have to resort to all these sometimes damaging habits and practices to feel that sense of empowerment. You can actually channel it into something just revolutionary and productive, and that's how powerful that is to me. So, but yes, thank you, appreciate it.
Hi everyone, thank you Abby. I can also relate a lot to what Abby's saying. I met Baldwin House also last year in August, and my first encounter with Baldwin House was when they were having an event and they were celebrating summer. We're halfway there. We haven't yet bought the building, but we only need $1 million more, so we'll get there. We're just celebrating that we are getting there. The person that took me there was Clara Lincoln, and she works with LEDC, the Latino Economic Development Center. She was helping my building in the Columbia Heights neighborhood It's called 1445 Park Road. That building is a 54-unit building. It's about 5 floors, so it's huge. And it's also 99% Latino immigrant housed spot. About 3 years ago, a group of wonderful and powerful ladies found their power, and they said we weren't not going to live in these harsh living conditions. We no longer want to feel unsafe in our own house. We had unhoused neighbors come into our apartment building, leaving a mess. We had people being robbed in the building, and so unless you were inside your apartment, there was really no safe space. So unfortunately, because our community is a lot of immigrants, a lot of family that had already faced displacement by leaving their homes, running for violence, corrupt governments, they have sort of settled and they found comfort in something that's to them way better to what they had before, but it's also not enough to what they deserve. So they found their voice, and we partner with LADC. Our community wasn't very open to it. Those ladies had a lot of they were cursed out. They were like, "What are you doing at my door? We don't want you here. We don't want to draw attentions to ourselves," because attention means police, attention means people that probably immigrants. You know, look, there's so many different types of immigrants, and so they just don't want to risk their stay, their comfortability. And so when everybody received a notice that our landlord was placing a 32 rent increase percent on our rent, and he submitted a hardship petition to the court, and it was going to be accepted and it was going to be processed, but fortunately LADC helped us get out of that. And so it was a big wake-up call for everyone. And that's when everyone was like, oh, wait, we have to do something about it. And so moving forward to the summer, people are getting anxious. They don't know how to fight this battle. And so we can have the translator, we can have people that speak our language, but if you don't have a member of the community pushing the agenda through, or word to mouth goes so far in these communities that because they don't trust strangers. And so I've grew up there since I was probably 5. And it sort of, when I started going to the meetings in the summer when I was back from college, it was a lot of only the lawyers talking, only the translator doing the translation. There was really you can see a lot of confused faces, but no one was asking anything. And so it was kind of like, that's when I was like, well, I don't get this. Like, I hope you guys do, but I need to ask these questions. And so I kept on asking, and people were just like, and there were some meetings where I didn't have to ask anything, but I heard a lot of like, Zulema, go ask something. I'm just like, okay, what do you want me to ask? And they were like, something important. And I was like, well, what's that something? And so we can get the money, we can get the policy, but if we don't have people talking to the community in a way the community understands, in a way that I grew up translating government documents to my parents where I didn't say the big words, I just summarized it into, hey, you need to pay this now. And so like doing those things, and we can also understand them where we don't understand legal talk, and we have to have people translate it in the way that we understand, but also not in a way that's respectful. And so long story short, we had a lot of support from other organizations. I was able to connect from some people with the Woodner, but it was just so overwhelming. I was, at the time, I was only 23, 22, and I was like, I can't fight this fight by myself, and I know I'm not by myself, and the moral support is there, but that can only go so far. So now we are being bought by a company called Novo, and they don't have a very good reputation. And so the payout for people, the most payout is $40,000 for people that lived there decades, and that's where it is, and people are tired of fighting because they don't know how to. And we can go to all these meetings, but there's no movement. We don't know where to move or how to move. So that's our story.
Thank you both. I'm really appreciative of you sharing stories about organizing and sort of like an organizing process midway too. That is sort of still in process. So thank you. Next person I'm going to call up is Kimon Freeman, who is co-founder of We Act Radio, a published author, and a founding board member of the Douglas Community Land Trust. I'm so honored to have you here. Thank you, Kimon.
All right. Thank you for having me. In my culture, African culture, we have to do a libation in speaking. So I would start by saying I want to acknowledge the displacement of almost 1 million Palestinians who right now are being bombarded and denied access to food, clothes, water, and shelter. I just want to put that in your hat as we continue with our first world problems. When I was born, Shaw was 90% black. It is now less than 30% black. And what's important to point out, and first let's give a round of applause to this young lady and this wonderful report that she put together, a lot of facts and figures. I'm on page 8. I'm gonna finish reading. I'm on page 8. I mean, it's a concentrated read. You read a paragraph, you get mad, you're like, shit. But one of the things I found comforting was that it said that black people are 3 times more likely than white people to be displaced. I was like, that's it? Only 3? I thought it was kind of low, because the fact is the average white family in DC has 81 times, not 81%, 81 multiples of the average black family. So for them to be 1 out of 3, you know, at a risk of being displaced, I felt was kind of low. And I realized, I went to a party in Bethesda, Maryland a couple of weeks ago, and this guy's house was worth $20 million. You ever been in a $20 million house? It was good. It's good. And I realized that, oh, there's white people, and then there's real white people. And so some of y'all are not really white. So don't get too comfortable. We're all in the same boat. And having said that, is that we need to first start by challenging the system. And challenge the system, you need to first start with challenging the language. So when you leave here, it's 2 things I want you to remember. 1, affordable is ambiguous and a hustle. Define affordable. A $20 million house is affordable to somebody. What do you mean affordable? My definition would be simply what HUD says. They say that 30% of your income, no more than 30% of your income should be dedicated to the cost of housing and utilities. But over half the people in the city are paying more than that. Some of them are driving Benzes and think they're doing good, but they're on real talk. Because the system is so insidious, late-stage capitalism is so insidious that it wants you to believe that there's some shame in that you're actually struggling, as long as you look good, you know. So don't get it twisted. It's because, you know, I knew some guys that was living one of these 3,000 a month efficiencies. You know, they got the concierge, they got the little granite top kitchen, you know, they got the little view, but it's 3 of them in an efficiency. I'm like, how y'all doing that? So it looked good, but in reality, we all struggling. So everybody say the rent's too damn high. Okay, one of the other facts I got from reading your page, your report up to page 8 was that the rent has been going up from 2017 every year about 5%, over 5%. right? And the greatest jump was 21 to 22 was like 14%. Anybody here salary went up 14% in 1 year? Raise your hand. All right, so I want y'all to understand that we all in the same boat, except for the real white people. But in the 60s, when it was no longer legal to have housing discrimination, some guy would come up and say to the other white people, the regular white people, you know, you need to sell your house before those people move in here, why it's still worth something. So in their rush to move out, they mostly sold the house for less than what it was worth, and they went out to the suburbs. And then black people came in, and after a few decades of benign neglect, where resources are not being equitably distributed, and you see prices of the houses going down, you see drugs coming in, you see the creation of the largest prison system in the entire world, and then somebody comes back and buys up all this depressed property for cheap, and then they create housing for $4,000 a month to the children or grandchildren of the people that left the first place 2 generations ago. Sound like a hustle, don't it? And we all been exploited. Housing is a human right. Housing is a human right. So change the language. What's affordable? And we're no longer dealing with landlords. This is not feudal Europe. We're not serfs. Ain't nobody a lord over you, okay? That's why you feel intimidated going to court. Oh, Lord, I got to go to landlord. No, it's just the building owner who's exploiting you. And lastly, let me say this. There is utopias on this planet that does exist. Look up Austria, Vienna. Austria, Vienna has one of the lowest crime rates in the world. You know why? Because they don't have homelessness. They don't have ghettos. They have social housing that's based upon, guess what? 30% of your income. So you worth $20 million, you're going to pay 30% of your income, which subsidizes everybody, the regular people, and we all live together. How about that? And it was also subsidized by American taxpayer money with the Marshall Plan to rebuild after World War II. So you actually got a stake in that, okay? Let's be forward-thinking. Let's change the system. Let's change the language. And let's make sure that we all know that we are the change. Martin Luther King marched right here in Washington, D.C., and he said, prepare to participate. So the greatest power is convincing people they don't have any. Don't let anybody ever take your power. Thank you.
Thank you, Kamon, so much. Thank you. I know the report's long. I appreciate your patience. It's my honor to invite up our last speaker, someone whose work I deeply admire and whose warmth, I think, really brings us all in along with her. So I want to invite up Celeste Bryant with the Washington Interfaith Network. Yeah.
Good morning, and thank you. Such a pleasure, and thank you to Ileana Golding for her wonderful work and Erica Williams for the leadership that she provides. I want to tell you first that I stand here on the shoulders of community voices, as you've heard here today. And so I want to lift those stories up to you as I speak about the work of the Washington Interfaith Network, and then lay out an agenda about how we can work together that I think also is anchored in the wonderful work that Ileana has done in her report. I want to give you a broad overview of WIN. Washington Interfaith Network. We're a nonpartisan, interfaith-led and volunteer-led organization that partners first and foremost with the community. In other words, we go out and we meet with community members, community organizations. We door knock in the street. We stop people. We ring their doorbells. We meet with public housing residents and their organizations. And we ask them, what are the priority concerns that you have in your life? Justice concerns. And then we identify agendas and work in partnership, side by side with them, to build the power and the influence that we need to address their concerns. I wanted to talk to you about the Black Equity Through Home Ownership campaign and its origins here. I work with that and lead that along with Pastor Lamar from Metropolitan AME Church. And we partner with a number of interfaith institutions, mosques, synagogues, etc., on this effort. And we have two primary goals, and then I'm going to tell you the stories that led us to those goals. One is to increase affordable home ownership, and we define that for Black people, opportunities for affordable homes to purchase. And we define that by people who have 80% AMI. In other words, we're not talking about always the lowest of income, but we're recognizing that not only are the community voices that we've heard here who are struggling in their renting and affording homes, but we also have people who are like school teachers, bus drivers, police officers, people who have what we would call a reasonable income, who are also among the displaced in DC. So I agree with the brother who spoke in terms of we have to define what we mean by affordable and understand that we're looking at how do we preserve affordability in the District of Columbia from people from different walks of life and different income levels. Okay, so let me lift up the story of a young woman named Nikesha. When I first started to work with the Washington Interfaith Network, they called us out to go and do some door knocking. This is my first time going out into the community and doing so, and we did this in Ward 7. I bumped into an African-American woman, introduced myself. I asked her, could we speak, and could she tell me about any concerns that she had in her community? Well, this young woman told me that she had just moved back to DC, having graduated from college, and that her mother still lived here in Ward 7 and owned a home, but that the community had changed, that a lot of the neighbors had sold their homes, others may have lost their homes, others had to leave because they could not preserve their homes because of the tax level, the tax base, or their ability to take care of their homes was compromised. So one of her concerns was she couldn't afford to rent an apartment on her own in the District of Columbia. Second concern, she's enrolled in graduate school for architecture, and she's concerned that she could no longer afford to buy a home in the very community in which she grew up because of the changing demographic. So I noticed that Eliana's report not only talks about displacement, but dispossession. Really that idea that her legacy of home ownership in this community is in jeopardy, that the cultural legacy that she has and the connection to this community in which now the changing demographic wanted to take a cemetery and change it into a dog park, that there's dispossession in that story. So that's Nikesha. That activated me. That made me say, I want to partner with the Washington Interfaith Network. How do I get young people like this woman to have a stake and be able to remain and not be displaced from as a native Washingtonian from the District of Columbia? I want to lift up another story for you. It's a young man that we work very closely with. I don't have permission to use his name, so I'm going to call him something else. I'm going to call him Rob. Rob was a basketball player in a high school here in DC, another native Washingtonian. And Rob went to college, but unfortunately his path to college was interrupted by a family emergency. His brother was killed. He had to move back here, start to work to support his family. He is now carrying a mountain of student debt, but he cannot afford to purchase, even though he works hard, works a couple of jobs, has 3 children. He now has a mounting credit card debt just to survive and pay to live and afford a rental housing, and yet cannot find a path to home ownership. So those are a couple of the stories. Now I want to talk about recommendations and things that we've been working on at WIN. Well, I'm going to give you one quick more story. As we've gone out and promoted the Black Equity through Homeownership effort, we've been reached out to by seniors, people who are legacy homeowners, people who have lived in their homes since the day they were born, whose roofs are in disrepair, who have the threat of predatory purchasers coming around and trying to trick them into selling their homes, and at the same time, they're struggling to maintain them. So what we're doing at the Washington Interfaith Network is not only partnering with the community to lift up their voices around what needs to change, but how do we want to change it? So some recommendations are, there are 3,000 vacant lots in the district. We'd like to see some of those lots that are owned by the district transferred over to us, or rather partnering nonprofit developers at low or no cost, and transform those into green housing that are affordable in the $450, $400 range, $1,000 range. We want to lift up a policy called Smart Buy that is already enacted in Prince George's County, Maryland. We met with them. And that's a funded effort through the state of Maryland in which they partner with banks. They lower credit scores to accommodate those people who are hampered by student debt that led them into this sort of cycle of bad credit. In addition, they buy down that student debt in the first 5 years of their mortgage. So that is funded, and they essentially are getting student loan forgiveness. We're leveraging the current funds that are being dispersed into climate change. Federal dollars are trickling down into DC government. We're using those funds to help retrofit houses of those legacy homeowners that I talked about who've been living in their houses and seniors. So how do we work together around these efforts? Washington Interfaith Network is a power building organization. We build relationships with organizations as allies like DCFPI, but we also last year, for example, met with the city council. We meet with the leaders at DHCD. I have an upcoming meeting with Colleen Green. We meet with the head of DIMPED, Nina Albert, who's the new head of DIMPED, and we try to build a relationship and a discussion around these efforts. And what we'd like to see is a broader, cohesive, coordinated vision around creative efforts such as these. Now, as I conclude, I want to point you also to our website for the Washington Interfaith Network. We too have issued a recent report that gives you the data, much like the DCFPI reports around student debt, $50,000 for those who graduated and who haven't. And it gives you the number around what we need to do to modify credit scores. It tells us where these geographically located dispossessed inequity exists. And we are challenging the District of Columbia, Robert White, the mayor, to coordinate their funding and resources across these agencies, DIMPED, DHCD, and DCHFA, DC Housing and Fiscal Organization, to look at how we can coordinate a fund, resources, and coordinate philanthropy to address these issues through Vacant to Vibrant, leveraging climate funds, and other ways to stem the flow of displacement in district. We can do it. Join us. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I turn it over to Todd to close, I just wanted to thank our speakers one more time. Thank you. I also wanted to note that there's some QR codes around, and if you scan those, it will bring you to our program for today, and there are links to all of the organizations and groups that these folks are part of, and you can learn more about their work. donate to their work if you feel capable of doing that, and stay connected with them. So just, again, thank you to everyone who shared their stories. I know it's vulnerable to come up here and share, and we're so grateful and appreciative. Todd.
Thank you, Ileana. Let's give everyone another hand clap. I want to extend my gratitude to Ileana for allowing us to leverage her work. In this event, I also want to acknowledge all of our community partners and their voices, because their voices are critical to this work. We cannot do it without you, so thank you for being here and for sharing your stories. It's truly impactful. And I want to acknowledge our board chair, Jerome, who's in the back. You can wave your hand. I believe that we had another board member, George Jones with Ride for the City. I think that he just stepped out. We have many of our funders in the room that make this work possible, so I want to thank you all for being present. Also, many community partners, many of our union partners are present, so thank you for taking the time to be with us today. So as we work to build a better tomorrow, we can't thank you enough for your presence today and always. We at DCFPI are committed to an anti-displacement agenda because we recognize how the harms of displacement don't start or stop with someone losing their home. Displacement is disconnection from identity and community, from safety and security, from childhood memories and familiar faces. As Dr. Mindy Thompson Fullove notes in her book, Root Shock, displacement is the destruction of one's emotional ecosystem, and its effects have an impact on our entire communities that can last for decades. Black people have always had to experience the pain of root shock in America, from the first slave ship that set sail across the Atlantic to the latest DC neighborhoods that are being gentrified and pushing out Black and brown residents. Local immigrants, particularly those who left their home countries to escape violence or poverty, are experiencing their own form of root shock as they seek stability in new neighborhoods in the district. Every day, the most vulnerable among us, including our elders and children, are literally pushed to the margins. So before we proceed, I want to take a moment of silence to hold space for our ancestors and our neighbors who have been forced to endure disconnection. Thank you. As we embark on our mission to combat and prevent displacement, we have to be sure we uphold our North Star vision for advancing an anti-racist, equitable future for the district. Notably, that means bolstering DCFPI's organizational capacity to deepen our engagement with community partners and district leaders like we're doing today. Through rigorous research and advocacy efforts, we must also identify and pursue key revenue raisers that will support the foundational investments that our community needs in the short and long term. At the heart of it all, we have to be and remain in community with local residents to empower their leadership and ultimately to help shape narratives and policy choices that reflect the will of the people. This all requires resources. So through DCFPI's Mentor for Change annual fund, we strive to deepen our engagement in impacted communities and work with district leaders to reimagine what's possible, creating the conditions under which people feel care, belonging, and can reach their full potential. So I am the Director of Institutional Advancement, so I do have to put this pitch in front of you. Your gift today will enable us to continue to complete foundational research and analysis that Ileana has done. It will enable us to dig deeper in communities and amplify the voices of community members and the many organizers and activists that are on the front lines doing this work. It will help us pursue progressive policy that supports the liberation of Black and brown people in the district. And so I encourage you today to make a gift to DCFPI, but don't only just make a gift to DCFPI. Make a gift to all of the organizations and the individuals that are present in this one that have shared their stories. As Ileana noted, in the program, and we will share the program out tomorrow also, but if you download the program, there are links and more information about all of the community organizations and activists that were present here today. And so we encourage you to get involved touch base with them. They'll be here at the front at the conclusion of this program because, like I said, we cannot do this alone. In a recent interview, Dominique Molden, a Black man and local community activist with Organizing Neighborhood Equity, or 1DC, said, "We have a right to the city. Much of our work at DCFPI is a reclamation of power, prosperity, and place. We all belong, and we can't thank you for helping us to make that true and for being here today. Be well and go in peace." Thank you.